Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the All-American Savage Show podcast. I am your host, John Burke. Thank you for tuning in today. I appreciate you sharing the podcast and you being here with me every morning or afternoon, depending upon when we get to the podcast. So I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving Day weekend. I hope you spent it with family and friends. And I hope you stuffed yourself silly on turkey and delicious food out there. And it was a truly good time for you this holiday season. I want to start off by saying don't forget that Shell Shock CBD Cyber Monday deal is still going on, 40% off site-wide, and then we do the bundle deals, you get almost 50% off. So if you've not taken advantage of that, it is not too late. It is not too late. From shellshockcbd.com, 40% off site-wide. Go check it out. Everything from Sleepy Time gummies to Delta 8. We've got what you need, pet chews, pet treats, everything, bath salts, everything CBD related, you name it, we've got it. So again, that is shellshockcbd.com, 40% off. The code is on the website. You click it at the top banner, automatically applies it to you. So, but all right, today's a little bit different. I wanted to start off today just a little bit different tone. Now, normally we get into the political spectrum. There's the Biden administration passing travel bans in Africa, essentially doing what Trump did to China back in early 2020, and Biden called him a racist for it. Biden is now doing it. And there's many different things we can hit on, which I'll address tomorrow in tomorrow's episode. But there's something that I wanted to address today. Now, if you don't follow me on Instagram, you really should. And I do a series about twice a week, sometimes more, called Confessions. And initially, Confessions was kind of a joke. And essentially, you write in and you confess something with complete anonymity. I think I said that right. That's one word I usually have a very difficult time saying. And the first time I did it, it was in a joking manner. And then I received instant feedback that people were saying it felt good to get something off their chest via text versus verbally saying it. And it resonated with a lot of people. And so I continued to do it. And it's just been a reoccurring thing. And again, it's completely anonymous. I don't post names. I don't message people back. I just leave it as it is. And it does a lot of good for a lot of people. And there's a lot of funny things that come about too. It's entertaining to say the least. But I wanted to address one question that I feel burns within a lot of hearts of a lot of people across the world. And let me read for you the question. This is in the Instagram confessions, and I posted it to my Instagram as well and addressed it there, but I wanted to go deeper into this. And the question was, or the confession was, it says, Dear John, I failed basic training, and I'm not sure I've completely forgiven myself for it. One more time. He says, I failed basic training, and I'm not sure I've completely forgiven myself for it. Now, this isn't just for those that have failed basic training. This can apply to anyone that has failed at anything that they have pursued in their lives. But from my perspective, this is the way I see it. When I was a drill sergeant, I had this one kid that came to me. And he was in shape. He was a stud. There wasn't anything this kid really couldn't do. But I could tell that he just wasn't into it. You can always tell based upon somebody's lack of motivation and sounding off, posture, body language. You can just tell. And this kid had came to us and he said, I just don't feel like the Army is right for me. I've tried. It's just not, it's not where I want to be. It's not that I'm scared. It's not that I'm afraid. I just don't like it. So naturally, we told him to go away because, a lot of people have these second thoughts when they bring themselves into an area that contributes to culture shock. You go from living on the couch, you go from being at home with mom and dad, and then you go into an environment where you have grown-ass men screaming at you, waking you up at like the butt crack of dawn to go out and exercise and do all these Army-related things. So naturally, there's a lot of people that will instantly second-guess their decision. It's normal. This is perfectly normal. It's nothing you should be ashamed of. My God, I was 17 when I went to basic training. Not a lot of people know this. It was my first time really being in a different environment where I was not around people that I normally hung out with. I cried when I was 17. I was stuck in 30th AG for a month and a half. And I remember being in my bed crying because I felt so lost. I felt like I fucked up. What you experience when you put yourself in that area of culture shock is completely normal. But let's continue. So this kid gave it more time. We tried motivating him. We tried talking to him. It's one of those cases where you take the drill sergeant hat off and you talk to him man to man and say, okay, what's going on? And it turns out this kid just genuinely wasn't happy. So we wound up pushing the paperwork through, first sergeant blessed off on it, and we got rid of him. We chaptered him out. Now, in basic training, it's different. Like you can get out. It's not going to be a permanent mark against you. The kid left. We all went on with our lives. 2 years later, and I'll never forget this, 2 years later, this same kid hits me up on Facebook. And I didn't remember him, to tell you the truth. I don't remember a lot of people because I have just a horrible memory. But this kid hits me up 2 years later. And he tells me, I'm doing great. He has a family now. He's married. He sent me pictures. And also tells me that he's a smoke jumper in California, fighting wildfires. And he sends me pictures of this as well. Now, if you don't know what a smoke jumper is, essentially they jump out of airplanes into the worst parts of a fire to go in there and put it out. And that's just paraphrasing layman's terms. A very, very dangerous job. And this kid is killing it at it. And he's happy. He's fulfilled. Now, let's go back to when he came to me and he said, I'm not happy here. When I grew up in the military, it was one of these things that if you wanted to quit at something, you were called a bitch, you were criticized, like, oh, you're just being a pussy. And there is a time and a place for things such as this. It's like when you're feeling sad for yourself, sometimes you need somebody to come along and give you a verbal kick in the ass to get you going. We all need that from time to time. But we have to stop and ask ourselves some things here. In our lives, how much of our happiness comes from what society and those around us dictate to us that happiness should be? And what I mean by that is I've read so many stories of people saying, I served because my parents served and they wanted me to serve. I became an insurance salesman because my father was an insurance salesman. I became this because my parents wanted me to be this. And I see this reoccurring over, and it's nothing new, realistically. It's really not. And so many of us have gotten wrapped up in this idea of what society dictates to us in defining happiness. The strength in this young kid was more strength than I had at that time, if I really think about it. He was able to go to his drill sergeants and say, drill sergeant, I'm not happy. Now, there's a difference, like I said before, in just bitching out and just quitting on yourself, which many people do, versus saying, I am genuinely not interested in this and I don't want to continue doing it. And it's much more serious in the military because if somebody does not want to be there, I don't want them there. It should not be back during the days of Vietnam to where you were forced to go. I don't want to be in a foxhole with someone that doesn't want to be there. So when people say that I believe in mandatory service, I don't. Our nation has never really had a problem, recruiting or enlisting people when it needed. Well, I should take that back. There was the draft for World War II, Korea, things such as that. But there was a lot of voluntary people that signed up to serve. But you get where I'm going with that. Let me digress. This kid was able to identify this. And he had the internal strength and fortitude to look into our faces, knowing full well that even his own platoon mates are going to criticize him, insult him, and all these things, and still wanted to pursue that which made him happy. He identified something that did make him happy. Well, when he says he can't, this other kid that writes me and that wrote to my Instagram, the Dear John, he says, I can't forgive myself. My question to you is, what do you have to forgive yourself for? If you really think about it, who did you disappoint? Your family? Who cares? It's your life. You've got one life to live on this earth, my friend. You've got one life, and that's it. If you really sit down and think about this, and this is what's been causing me serious depression over the last year, I want to think, because I'm realizing certain things about myself that I had wrong for a very long time. And this was one of them. But if we've got one life to live, shouldn't we do our best to live the happiest version of this life possible? Too many times people come to me in my DMs and they say, I don't know what to do about this. I don't know how to feel about that. I feel lost. I feel confused. This is my problem. This is my situation. I don't know what to do about it. And the most common response I give to people that has actually worked for me phenomenally is a role reverse. And I tell people, it's like, look, if you had a son or a daughter, specifically with women in abusive relationships, and men too, but mainly women, and you're verbally abused and berated, you're physically assaulted, things such as this. And the other part is I talk to famous people as well that DM me about this kind. And I don't post about it because I respect their privacy. Even famous people deal with this. And I asked them, I was like, if you had a daughter and she came to you with the problem you just told me, what would you tell her? And then the light switch flips on and they realize what they need to do. I would tell her to get the fuck out of there. I would tell her to drop that loser. I would tell him to get away from that toxic woman or that toxic man. Okay. Then why aren't you? You see, it's very easy to look at somebody else's issues from the outside looking in. But when we're in the midst of the storm internally, it's very hard to see the pathway forward. Because of our emotions, our situation, everything can seem so muddled and confused that we just don't know which path to take. But try that in the future, just throwing that out there. Because I never forgot. I was taught that by my platoon sergeant. And I think I've talked about this in the podcast before, and I'm going to get back to this gentleman's question. But I remember we were on a patrol one time. And one of the staff sergeants always had to stay with the trucks. The trucks would take us to a certain point, and then we'd drop off the dismounts, and they'd go on foot to patrol certain areas in Afghanistan. And nobody ever wanted to stay with the trucks. It was boring. You're sitting there for hours, nothing to do. And I remember getting out of the truck and walking over to them because they were still close by. It'd been about an hour. I walked up and was like, hey, is everything going good? And my platoon sergeant looks at me. And I'm still friends with him to this day. He looks at me, he's like, why are you on the ground? I was like, I was just bored. He goes, your job is to be in that truck and control the guns and then communicate with base. I was like, I know, I wanted to get out. And he looked at me, he's like, what would you do if your team leader did what you just did to me? And I looked at him, I was like, you're right. You're right, Sarnt. I went back to the trucks. I never forgot that lesson. What would you do if it was somebody else? So to go back to this gentleman's question, I know I'm all over the place, but this is just how my mind works. The hamster's going 1,000,000 miles an hour right now. Why did you first pursue going into basic training? Because you thought it might bring you a sense of fulfillment and happiness. Why did you pursue that degree in that field? Why did you go after that job? Because you thought initially it would bring you a sense of happiness and fulfillment. But you don't know for sure. All you know is based upon what you see, yet have not experienced personally. So realistically, you're assuming you're going to be happy from naivety, being naive. I probably said that wrong. But once you experience something, you have every right to change your mind. How can we know if something that we're going to eat is going to be delicious until we've actually tasted it? You don't know. You go based upon sight, possibly smell, the opinions of other people that say this is good, and then you yourself push forward and you attempt it, only to realize it's not as fulfilling as you thought it would be. It takes a very unique, strong person to say, no, this doesn't bring me a sense of fulfillment. This does not bring me happiness. I don't want to do this anymore. That takes some serious strength, especially when the overwhelming majority of society says this is what should make you happy. You know, oftentimes the most loneliest and unhappiest people are those that break away from the chains of societal pressures and pursue that which they think as an individual will make them happy. They will remain unhappy for the longest time because they're on a different journey than the rest of everybody else, the herd, if you will. They've eaten the grass that the group has eaten, and they're not satisfied with it. They're not content with that. They look up and say, this is not what I want. I'm not like you. I can't think like this. I can't eat like this. I'm starving inside. I need something different. And they break away from the herd, knowing that what they had previously eaten was not giving them fulfillment, and they're starving inside. And they've got to find that which is going to give them a sense of fulfillment. So then they pull away from the group and they begin their individual journey. And I can't tell you how long each person's journey is going to be. I am still on the journey myself. Now, when you pursue that journey, when you've decided to take that stand and say, this is not for me, you are going to be hit from all sides with criticisms. It shouldn't be that way, but that's just the way society is. Your parents will say all manner of things about you. Some. I shouldn't say all. Your friends, your family. Many will turn their backs on you. If not, and you have good support, they'll actually encourage you, which is what we need more of. I had a lady DM me saying, I just don't know where to go from here. She'd separated from the herd, but she didn't know where to go. I told her, what makes you happy? She's like, I don't know. I was like, well, there's your answer. Well, what do you mean? Their answer is you don't know. So what does that mean you should be doing right now? Well, I guess I should try new things. There you go. The answer isn't direct. It's generalized. You have to go out and try new things. Experience life. Life is a buffet. You've got to try various different things out in life to see what gives you that sense of fulfillment. And if you bounce from thing to thing to thing, it doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you different. We are all programmed and built differently. So if you apologize for failing basic training, who did you really fail here? So what you weren't called to be a soldier? We're not all cut out to be soldiers. It doesn't make you a better person. Of course, we troll people. We talk a lot of shit just to do that. But do I think I'm better than anybody else for having served this country? Absolutely not. Do I troll people and make it appear that I do? Absolutely I do, just because I know the trolls fucking hate that. Everybody has their part to play in this life. Now, whether you want to think that we should play a part in regards to contributing to society or pursuing individual happiness, which as a result should do something like that, it's really up to you. But the strongest people, like I said, are the ones that are able to be honest within themselves and say, this does not bring me happiness. I cannot keep doing it. And the other thing that I want to talk about, and then we'll move on to the second part of this podcast, this episode, the first of the Dear John series, is that I had all this stuff in my mind, and it's just, there's so much that I want to address. It's just a lot, because it's me having to relearn so many of the things that I was taught growing up in the Army. And it's just, yeah, it's hard to explain. But to go back, when you say, I still haven't forgiven myself, you've wronged nobody. There's no one to apologize to. In fact, you've actually realized one of the options that you wanted to pursue didn't work out, so you pursue something different. And again, just because you can't serve does not make you any less of a human being, much less American. The kid that I referenced before became a smoke jumper. He's probably doing way more now than many in our military ever will, because we're not even deploying anymore. Doesn't make their sacrifices any less valuable. When it comes to contributing to society, he's doing a lot. Serving in the nation's military is not the only way to serve this country, if that's what you're called to do. I read in the comments on the Instagram post I just made, even law enforcement officers saying the same thing. It's not just the military. We have to pull away from the groupthink. You have to be internally strong enough to be able to identify within yourself when you're not happy. And if you're not happy, what are you going to do to change it? Now, the one thing I've learned is when people come to me with these questions of, I'm not happy in this relationship, John. I'm not happy in my job, John. I'm not happy in this, that, or the other. Well, you've identified that. So my next question is, what are you doing about it? And that's where I want to go with the second part of this episode. So to the kid who says he hasn't forgiven himself, you've identified that it didn't make you happy. When you quit that job you thought would bring you happiness. When you ended the relationship that was incredibly difficult to do. I had to walk away from a relationship I was in for 9 months, and I felt like I was emotionally starving inside. There were so many disconnects, and she was a genuinely good person. It hurt. It hurt bad. 9 months of investment into this. Went to couples therapy. Learned more about myself, how to be a more effective communicator. But at the end, I had to break up because I felt it just wasn't meant to be. And I wanted it to be because I didn't want to be lonely anymore. I didn't want to be alone. I wanted to share experiences with somebody, and that's perfectly normal. It was one of the hardest things to do. And I still feel lonely. That's just a human nature. That's a human emotion. It's completely normal. But I'm growing more accustomed to that feeling because where it's not going to allow me to compromise myself in future relationships just to not feel lonely anymore. Because more oftentimes than not, people will experience that sense of loneliness and throw themselves into the first relationship that comes along simply to get rid of that feeling. But all they've done is replaced it with a temporary high that eventually will transition into a feeling of emptiness and unhappiness in the relationship. But you stay because of familiarity, of comfort. When in reality, if you ended it and you walked away from it, or you didn't pursue it, and you were strong enough to hold your own happiness as paramount above everything else, you'll experience loneliness for longer. But when you eventually do find that person that you're meant to be with, that clicks, you're going to be 10 times happier. So to the second part of the podcast. To those that have already went forward with the first step in identifying the source of the unhappiness, what are you doing now about it? You left basic training. You made that first step. You quit that job. You ended that relationship. What are you doing now? It's not just enough to take that first step. You put your boat in the water. Good. But now have you trimmed the sails and pulled up the anchor? Because if you haven't, you're still stuck in the port. You're not going anywhere. You're existing in a state of just perpetual spinning. You've got to go out and pursue other things. I read a message from one woman. She said that I have not been in a relationship in 8 years because of a lack of trust, that I was scarred from the past. I still have to respond, but my response to that is, that's your choice. You choose to be that way. Nobody forced you to think that way. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear, ladies and gentlemen. This is my advice. And again, I'm not a life coach. I'm not a therapist. This is just my own experience. So you take that with a grain of salt. So please be aware of that. I am not some psychologist or therapist. I am not one of these think gurus. This is just me. But when she told me that, that's your choice. Look, I'm jaded just like the next person. You think it's easy for me to fucking date? Oh, God, no. I've had women that I've spoken with on these dating apps, and they'll look me up on social media and they instantly block me because they feel like I'm an asshole or I'm a dickhead. I've had women that have received DMs from trolls that hate me and want to see me dead, end a relationship. Stalkers try and freaking undermine everything I do. You know how hard that is? Not to let that just make you feel jaded? It's insanely difficult. But when the right woman comes along, she'll be able to tolerate that kind of shit. Because she'll understand the kind of person I am. So yeah, it's a lonely journey. And it's very easy to fall into that slippery chasm, if you will, of being jaded towards everybody. And sure, we all go through our emotional slumps. I understand that. But it's not fair to every single other person out there that maybe wants to come into your life and get to know you as a person. Now, I'm not saying overlook red flags. I'm not saying just let anybody into your life. But to remain jaded from a past abuse to the point where it's affecting your future happiness is a choice. The fact I know it's a choice is that she's already identified it. So again, my question is, what are you doing now about it? Are you simply going to say, I'm going to be single forever? Okay, that's your choice. Accept that. If that's what you want, then you're going to condemn yourself to a life of internal misery. Or maybe you learn to be alone and you just never want to be with somebody. I mean, every person, again, like I said, is built differently. Some people are genuinely better off alone. They enjoy the solitude, and I get that. I understand that. Don't get me wrong, it's nice being alone in my house. But there are times that, yes, I do wish there was a woman there to share experiences with. So what are you doing now about it? You've been strong enough to identify the first step, which is to pull away from the source of unhappiness. In the military, it was the stupidest thing I'd ever learned, but they said, what's the first thing you do to a burn victim? Dumbest fucking answer imaginable, but the first step is to remove them from the source of the burn. Well, no fucking shit. But then you apply that to life, and it actually makes a lot of sense, and it rings true. What do you do to help somebody with their unhappiness? First, remove the source of the unhappiness. And that's the hardest part, because then you have to look down inwardly and identify the source of the unhappiness. So what are you going to do about it? That's the second question. You need to sit down and develop a plan. And all things comes in time. All things come in time, the right time. I do believe in destiny. I do believe in fate. I believe in a lot of these things. And I believe sometimes take the times of solitude and invest in internal growth. Because I think deep down, a lot of this is going to help you understand your individual worth. When you can overcome the ability to, I shouldn't say the ability, when you can overcome wanting to fit in with society for the sake of seeming cool, and instead venture out on your own to pursue your own individual happiness, you are a much stronger person than most people. And that's going to increase your level of self-worth. And other people are going to see that. And they're going to want that. They're attracted to that. Especially those that have no self-worth. That's the hard part, is determining that when pursuing somebody else. Now, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. That's a whole different episode. But you get where I'm going with that. By you separating from the herd and going after what you think might make you happy is definitely going to make you a much stronger person internally. Now, for those that went through basic training, they graduated, and they love it, that's awesome too. They have found what makes them happy. If that makes any sense. I think it does. So you've got nothing to forgive yourself for. The only reason, and I'm going to end it with this last part, the only reason that you feel guilty is because, in my opinion, from where I grew up, was toxic masculinity. I know. You're listening to this right now, and your head and your mind just exploded. John said toxic masculinity. Not in the context of which liberals use it in regards to being masculine. There is nothing wrong with being masculine. In fact, we need more of that in this society. Toxic masculinity is as follows. When I grew up in the military, again, I was raised by a generation of sergeants that all they knew was what their sergeants had taught them. Stop being a bitch. Don't be a pussy. If you fail at this, you're a piece of shit. If you fail Ranger School, you're just a shitbag soldier. If you fail at that, you're a horrible human being. You should go kill yourself. You should do all this stuff. That's immature thinking. That is toxic masculinity. Just because you fail at something does not make you any less of a human being. I failed Pathfinder school twice. I'll use myself as an example here, ladies and gentlemen. You can think of me what you want. Fucked up my knee in pre-ranger. Failed Pathfinder school twice. Second time my grandfather died on the last test, so I had to drop, which I was really pissed about because I was almost there. I was actually in the running to be honor grad, but that was because I'd already been through the course before and I knew what was coming, so I knew what to study for. So realistically, that wasn't fair. I failed a lot of things in my life. I struggled a lot. I still struggle. But look at me now. If I had based my level of self-worth only off of my failures, I'd be a miserable human being. But now, I've got a large social media following because of speaking my mind. I've got a very successful company, which I'm grateful to God for. We employ a lot of good people. We've got a very successful podcast. We're able to help and give back to the veteran community. But if I instead had valued myself based only upon my failures, I never would have achieved this. I would never achieve what I'm going to continue to push forward to achieve even more of, more success. And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to have more failures coming my way. In fact, it's the opposite. I will continue to fail. Just because you're successful in one aspect of your life does not mean you're going to be successful in other aspects or launching other businesses, for example. Doesn't work that way. I wish it did. I really wish it did. You can't base your level of self-worth only on your failures. What you should do is take a step back and ask myself, what have I learned from those failures? But to go back to the toxic masculinity thing, in this day and age, I feel like we have been led astray, and myself am partially responsible for this. But I don't chalk it up to willful ignorance. It's just a matter of haven't learned said lesson yet. We have a lot of influencers in the veteran community that I feel are portraying a false sense of masculinity for the sake of appearing to be super masculine, to be cool, to be accepted, to have a persona of being a badass. And I watch a lot of the things that they say. But more importantly, I listen to a lot of the things that they don't say. Not a lot of people will have conversations about these topics per se. It's not just so black and white that we say, just don't quit and don't give up. That's all it takes. But what about we go deeper into that and say, well, maybe they just don't want to do it. And I'm not condoning willfully quitting at something just because times get hard. That's not what I'm saying at all, so don't take it that way. What I'm talking about is a much deeper understanding of self. And being true to yourself and identifying, does this really make me happy? Is this what I really want to do? I think we get too focused on following these people that create these false perceptions that are not grounded in reality. But I think it's up to each individual person to be able to interpret that as they want and identify those types of people as they want. Toxic masculinity is a very serious issue in the veteran community because a lot of it stems from people not wanting to get help when they're feeling mentally weak. Another veteran saying, just suck it up and stop being a bitch. That's toxic masculinity. It doesn't work that way. Feelings and emotions, that's what we have. We're human beings. We experience these. If you think otherwise, you're an idiot. You have no idea what you're talking about. You cannot ignore feelings. You cannot ignore emotions. Instead, if you really think about it, and I ask you to really think about this, ladies and gentlemen, we talk about being alpha, about being a Chad, about being cool. And instantly we have in our minds this thought of like a super buff motherfucker. He's rich. He's getting all the women, all these other things. And I'm not saying that for everybody. But I think most part, we all have in our own mind a picture of what that person represents, or female. But I've learned over the last year, it's in fact the opposite. It's the man or woman that have such a level of understanding of themselves that are able to control their emotions, not suppress and not ignore, but instead look into and explore and learn. Our minds and our bodies are two different things. Our mind dictates to our body how it feels, how it's thinking, all these other things. I think the hardest part is for us to understand our own minds and what makes us tick, what makes us work. And a lot of it stems into the field of philosophy, I guess, possibly. Definitely heavily into psychology. But the most dangerous man, the most alpha man in my mind, is the man that can understand himself and not allow his emotions to control him, but instead address them and understand self. I guess maybe in layman's terms, be able to have the playbook of how their brain works, why it works the way it does. I hope that makes sense. Versus the type of man that just suppresses the emotions, that suppresses the feelings, doesn't address them, lets them build up, and internally is dying inside. They can sit there and say that they love life, they're happy, there's all these things. But the one thing they're afraid of doing is addressing the emotions and feelings they have inside, because society in this toxic masculinity area says a real man, a real alpha, a real Chad doesn't do that. In fact, it's the opposite. A real man does not care about what society says, does not care about the criticisms he's going to receive. Really think about that. Instead, you're strong enough to say, I am going to identify these things in the face of knowing I will be made fun of. I will be ostracized. I'll be cast out of your masculine society. But you do it anyway. How much stronger does that make you? Think about that. To say, no, I've got something wrong inside of me and I don't know what it is, but I got to figure this out because I'm fucking dying. And I can't ignore this anymore. Because once that person, once that human being identifies that and they can work on it, they start to understand themselves. There are times now I will feel a certain way and I automatically know, hey, something's coming. There's this psychological splinter in my brain right now and it's got to get to the surface. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the lessons that I'm going to learn from this is, but I know it. I've grown enough internally to know when I feel a specific way, it's because something is wrong and my body and my brain have to work through it. It's almost like an out-of-body experience, I guess. But it's kind of like when my brain is sending me these signals saying something is not right, you are not happy, there's something wrong. Okay, well now let me take the time, days, weeks, months, I don't know, to try and identify the source of the unhappiness. Rather than ignore it, suppress it, pretend it doesn't exist, instead experience it. Because once I do figure out the source of the unhappiness, I can address it and then hopefully rectify it and be 10 times happier. But also be able to look back with my shoulder and say, that's how I deal with that. And the thing that really aggravated, I had somebody write me in, and she said, and this is the thing that really pissed me off. She said, have you ever considered that maybe you're split personality disorder? Maybe you should go seek medication for this? And this woman is not trained whatsoever. But she made this comment, and any lesser person, say like somebody was weak-minded, considered that and said, maybe I am. You do realize that, and I'm not saying this for all cases, I don't want to be on medication. I don't want to ignore these emotions and feelings to take the easy way out. Instead, and this is me personally, I'm not saying this for everybody, this is me. I don't want to suppress this. I want to experience this. It sucks. It hurts like a motherfucker. But there's a reason for this. There's a reason I feel this way. And throwing medication at it only numbs the symptoms. But instead, maybe you should address the symptoms. Look, I've never said that shell shock is going to fix your problems, nor should it. I hope people understand the difference there. Sometimes you just need something that's going to get you through to the next day. But to ignore the source of your problems, whether it be taking Delta 8, smoking weed, whatever, going to the gym, if that helps you, that's great. But if you're not going deeper and exploring more as to why you feel the way you do, you're not going to be fixed. You are going to continue to be damaged. The overall goal is to fix yourself. Sometimes therapy is needed. Talking to someone that is trained in that field. And I think people don't understand like the benefits of therapy. Therapy is not there for you to go cry to somebody. That's not what it's there for. Therapy is there for you to be honest with that other person that's trained in this field and for them to help you develop a plan of attack of how to get past this, how to address it and fix it or heal from it. In the military, coming back, you see, just like a comment right here, this Alex Smith says, you need to fix yourself and get therapy, John Burke. You don't know who I am, and you'll be blocked for that. You don't know who I am or what I'm going through. So that right there is an ignorant comment. I don't tolerate those types of people. But in the military, we came back from Afghanistan, and a lot of dudes were fucked up. A lot of guys were hurting, and they didn't even realize it. They didn't even realize it. And if any of us had requested to go to behavioral health to address our symptoms, then honestly, you look back and they were fucking red flags, clear as day. We would have lost our jobs. I was a platoon sergeant at the time, the 101st Airborne. And I felt there was something not right. But I didn't want to address it because men don't do that. But say like I had, and I went to behavioral health to seek out help, I would have been fired. I would have lost my platoon. I would have lost my job. So what alternative are a lot of these people given? And that's the other conundrum of this situation. That's the other problem that we don't really look too much at, I think, in the military. Hopefully it's changed now. And the problem with that, though, also is people are going to abuse the system. You're going to have a lot of people that utilize that as a means out versus a means of trying to get helping it fixed. That's the problem there. So, I know I've went off on a tangent on this, but that's why I love podcasting. It's why I love talking. I just get my mind out there. But the second part of what I said still stands true. What are you doing about it now? What's your plan of attack? And sometimes that plan of attack is not having an individual answer. Maybe it's just having a generalized direction of which way to go. Like, I'm not happy right now, so I'm going to start trying this. Okay, good. You're doing something. Sign up for those classes. Go back to school. Audition for that part. Go seek out that specific job. Ask that girl out. Ask that guy out. At least you're moving forward. Because if you ask yourself that question, what am I doing now, and you don't have an answer, you're wrong. You are 100% wrong. Now, there's a difference in saying, I need time to think about this, because that's still doing something. But to sit there and, like I said, in that constant state of your boat anchored in the harbor and you're just spinning in circles, not going anywhere, that's when you're wrong. And you won't seek any improvement. And you won't see any improvement. It won't change. So to you that are in a toxic relationship, you're in a job you hate, you're dating someone you're not really interested in, whatever the source of your unhappiness, if you are not doing anything to change your situation, you cannot expect change to come from without. It has to come from within. Gandhi talked about be the change you want to see in the world. That's not just in the world. That's in your own life. You want things to change, then change them. It's not going to be easy. You're going to go through a lot of pain. You're going to go through a lot of growth. A lot of feelings of anxiety and loneliness. You will. It's there. It's waiting for you. And I think that's what pushes a lot of people away from leaving those toxic relationships or those jobs or things like that because of your fear of the unknown. And I'll leave you with this. I've said this many times before. In our minds, when we look at change, when we look at two doors, we have two doors to choose. The door on the right as we open it up and we see everything before us. It's currently where we're at. It's the same path we've walked down time and time again. Let me rephrase that. It's two paths instead of two doors. The path on the right is familiar. You know where it goes. You recognize everything about it. You know every twist and turn, every rise, every fall, every tree, every blade of grass. But that path does not make you happy. It's just doing the same shit over and over again. And the path on the left is completely dark. You have no idea what lies beyond that gate. And instantly, in that darkness, in that ether, the ether of the unknown, in your mind, you create monsters, cliffs, depressions, near-death experiences, the worst things imaginable, because that's how the human brain works for the most part. But you will come to find that when you pursue that path, that you don't know where it goes, but you know it's going somewhere different than where you're already at, you will come to find out that more times than not, those monsters that you created in your own mind are in fact not real. The mountains that you thought existed on that path are entirely climbable. You just underestimated yourself. Those depressions, you can walk around because you've seen them before on the other path. You identified them. You know what's coming. How little we must think of ourselves and undervalue our ability to cope and overcome simply for maintaining the feeling of comfort and safety on a path that inwardly does not make us happy. Think about that. You don't have to make a decision today. If this doesn't apply to you, then so be it. That's awesome. I hope you have a wonderful, happy life. But there are so many people out there that DM me day after day after day, and I see it consistently. And myself, I'm right there with you. We've all separated from the herd. The only difference is, ladies and gentlemen, I'm on that path that I've never went down, and I'm telling you, I can look over at my shoulder at you right now and wave to you from it and saying, hey, I'm still here. I'm still here. What are you waiting for? I have learned so much in the last year. In that 9-month relationship, I learned a lot from her. We're still friends. We still talk. And I do believe that people come into your life for a reason. Another woman I'm talking to made a very good point to me. She said, the answer to a lot of your questions are in the mouths of complete strangers, because everyone comes with their own individual experiences. And while you might not have the answer to somebody or to something you're dealing with, somebody else might. And that's why it's good to have these interactions with people all throughout your life, because you're going to learn things from them if you have your eyes open. If not, you learn nothing. I'll leave you with that. I hope this helps. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. Again, don't forget, 40% off at shellshockcbd.com. I got to throw that in there. And I hope if you are not happy in your relationship, in your life, I hope you listen to this. And I hope you look at the path that you've never traveled down and understand that that darkness is not all you think it is. It's not as scary as you thought it would be. So, you have a wonderful day. Thank you for tuning in. I'll probably be doing a few more of these Dear Johns sporadically throughout the podcast, but I did want to address this because I feel like this is a very common question asked. And again, I am not trained in this. These are just my opinions and my thoughts from my own experience. You take it as what you want, apply your own individual perspective to it, and ultimately pursue that which makes you happy. You stay savage, America.